Let's talk about the game across the pond at Aviva Stadium in Dublin, Ireland, 2:30 on NBC. It is the Navy Midshipmen. It is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame favored by 21 points, Dan. That's a big number.
It is.
In week 0 against a team that only lost to you by 3 points a year ago. Things have changed considerably if you are a Notre Dame fan. However, this is one of those rivalry matchups, right? One of those games that, at least over the last 20 years, has at points had a history of being close. Not consistently, but it always seems like when you least expect it. Navy, at least under Ken Niumatalolo, Navy,
right,
had its moments against Notre Dame. Obviously, this offseason was loaded with news. It is easy to forget the Ken Niumatalolo news on the Navy side, i.e. he's not the coach there anymore. This year, it's going to be Bryan Newberry. He was promoted from within. He was a defensive coordinator under Ken Niumatalolo. He had done a really good job, especially building up a rush defense, which we can talk a little bit more about as we go through this.
Well,
preview,
certainly the pass defense was just as good, right? Is that how it works?
No.
Or was it the worst in America? Continue.
It was not an ideal pass defense. The rush defense was considerably better, and we can talk about that and the wrinkles that it provided last year, how it might factor in this year. But how you feeling, man? How do you feel about this game?
Well, first of all, if you're not subscribed at youtube.com/@solidverbal, you fully missed Ty's dog in the background of his studio right there.
I started talking about Notre Dame Navy. She decided she wanted to be part of the action. Yeah.
No, she's roaming around. You'll see some fluff floating around there. I feel, I don't know, you have to go all the way back to what? The halcyon days of 2022 for a close matchup between these two teams when Navy was still sort of reeling from, a down period. It's still a down period for Navy football considering the highs of the Ken Niumatalolo era, but that was a 3-point game. I think Navy came back. But
it was one of those games where I think the final score made it appear closer than it actually was.
Yes.
Notre Dame had ample opportunity to put that game on ice. Right. And what it amounted to, from my vantage point, was Navy, with a legitimately good ground defense, was able to kind of bottle up that side of what Notre Dame wanted to do. Notre Dame was very, very one-dimensional last season. It needed a ground game in order to unlock some passing lanes down the field for Drew Pine.
Right.
But Navy realized that, hey, we got to bring the heat. We don't necessarily have the athletes to match up in space. We got to bring the heat on Drew Pine if they're going to throw the ball. And in doing so, they confused him. He was not able to take advantage of some of what was open downfield.
If I remember correctly, didn't they just keep sending corners because he's not going to throw to receivers?
That was exactly right. They kept bringing the heat. They kept finding ways to confuse Drew Pine.
Yeah.
And because the ground defense was good, Notre Dame couldn't really run to the level that they wanted. And because Drew Pine wasn't good enough through the air to really take advantage, alas, that's why Navy was able to build up some momentum and make that game closer in the end.
So you have a clearly better team, but two teams playing overseas. And if you remember, if you go all the way back to 2022, once again, Europe was the only continent in which Northwestern could win a game. So you had the weirdness of Nebraska being down last year and Northwestern being more prepared and, being better in bigger moments. Are you worried at all about the strange nature of playing in Dublin for these two teams with a big spread that points to Notre Dame being the clearly better and more talented team, but the combination of it being overseas, week 1, new quarterback, new coordinator, new coach for Navy, new full-time, that kind of thing, that it's sort of a stay away, or are you confident enough in Notre Dame to feel good about that number?
I feel pretty good about the number, and here's why. I mean, we talked about what they did to Drew Pine. I don't think they can do that with Sam Hartman. I just don't think they can, and I get that it's week 0 and the team might not be firing on all cylinders quite yet, but I don't think they can take that same tactic with Sam Hartman. Last season, and I cannot emphasize this enough, and it was true in more games than just the Navy game, Notre Dame needed to establish the run to open up that passing game. But with Hartman, I think now as QB1, and especially in this game, Dan, I think we see the opposite. Essentially, I think Navy still wants to bring the pressure because they know they don't have those athletes to match up in space. So the softer coverage angle for them will not necessarily work, but the pressure won't affect Hartman the way it affected Drew Pine.
Yeah, and especially having that rib out of the way, right? That he's just as loosey-goosey as ever, Ty.
He'll be free and clear.
Yeah.
I think we'll see much more effectiveness in the passing game. I think a lot of that goes without saying this season, but I expect bigger plays in the passing game.
Okay.
And I think maybe we'll see some of the ground game later on as things start to kind of shake out. Maybe Navy wears down a little bit, but I am hopeful as a Notre Dame fan that we start seeing some names. We start seeing some names out wide, get a better sense for what this receiver room looks like. They have options. We just didn't see a whole lot of production from them a year ago. So I'm excited for it. It'll be great to just have Notre Dame out there. It'll be a really big deal for Notre Dame. I know it's just the Navy matchup, right? If you want to say it that way. But having kind of the national stage, like it's the first game, right?
It's the first game. Yeah.
Having that stage, I think, will be an opportunity for them to kind of cleanse the palate from a year ago and start fresh with an exciting new chapter led by Sam Hartman.
Well, you give Navy the advantage in terms of being more efficient at traveling across seas. Yes, the United States Navy.
Correct.
Is there anything about the pace of play that Navy, if they're playing all right, that just keeps the ball away from Notre Dame? And not that Notre Dame won't win because of it, but maybe that over doesn't hit. Maybe that spread doesn't quite come to fruition. Any concern there?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really, because I think the game is going to take a much different tenor than it did last year. I don't think it's going to be a struggle to establish Notre Dame on the ground. I think it's going to be right out of the chute Sam Hartman throwing it, and that will change the complexion of the game. If you're an option team, if you're Navy, you don't want to fall down early. You don't want to go 3 and out a couple times early. That sets the whole thing back. That doesn't really work with the formula. And I think Notre Dame can do that. I've got them something like 38-14 in this matchup.
I'm going to go against you just because I'm making the case for all these reasons. I'm going to take the points. I think Notre Dame wins by 17, but I think the possessions will be limited enough. If you have that combination, look, Navy's pass defense was atrocious, but if Navy can get off the field a couple of times, even on offense, if they're not scoring, I think they're going to chew enough clock that I think it's going to be difficult to separate. So I'm going to take those points. We disagree,
but keep that 17 number in mind. We'll talk about it later. I promise you.
Okie dokie.